Okay, Thursday, October 7th, 2021, the Hallowell Review Committee, we are convening at 6:36. First item on the agenda is roll call. Mr. Gerton? Here. Ms. Chartier? Here. Mr. Najarian? Here. Mr. Corvo?
Here.
Mr. Mayo? Here. Mr. Simpkins? Here. Mr. Savini will be joining us a little later. The chair is here, and Mr. Hallowell is absent for this evening. Second item on the agenda is review and approval of draft meeting minutes from September 16th, 2021. Give everybody a minute to review those.
I move to accept.
Okay, we have a motion from Mr. Jurian. We have a second from Mr. Mayo. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Next on our agenda is for review, discussion, review, and action, Weston and Sampson invoices, and any comments that we have on the final report. So, why don't we start with the invoices first? Carolyn provided us with a breakdown of the July and August invoices. So if you all want to take a moment to look at those.
I do.
No, not the agenda, the
Invoices?
yeah.
So the one item that I want to call to everybody's attention that I was looking at is under task number 8, where the meetings are, and they've billed out 100% for June and July. So the 45% completion is not accurate in the percentage complete column. They technically owe us 8 meetings. They've attended 6, which I've included the public charrette. The total kind of approximates out to $666. So in addition to the fact that they still have the town council meeting to attend, I was going to suggest that we pay them for the work that's completed less the meetings, just because we do need them to come back, and they haven't finalized that portion of their contract.
Well, what are you saying? Pay them for the 8 meetings?
They're billing out 100% for the 8 meetings when they've only attended 6.
Okay.
So they still have the 2 town council meetings. They also have, per contract, they also have 2 meetings with town staff, but we can say that one of those meetings was, the 5th meeting when Carolyn attended our additional meeting here.
I'm confused by this then. If the amount budgeted was 53,
yep.
they've eaten that up, and they're saying they're only 45%.
Yeah, so that 45% complete should say 100% complete.
So that's wrong.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's what's confusing me.
Yep. So technically, that 45% should read 100%.
Okay.
However, they still have the town council meeting to tend to. So I would say we do less,
Well, if they're gonna charge us additional, then we have to talk about that. Are they gonna charge us over and above that?
No.
Okay, fine.
So we were also discussing at the town council meeting on Monday to withhold a final payment until 2 things are accomplished. One, obviously they attend the town council meeting, but 2, that they agree to, or we get something in writing for them to modify or remove that 8,300, I think it was, right?
The task number 5, market
Task 5,
analysis.
yep.
Oh, you're just gonna issue a change order, essentially.
Yeah. We just need, I reached out to Carolyn. Councilor Vadney asked for a letter from Weston and Sampson stating that they are in fact okay with removing that from the contract, so I've requested that from Carolyn. So,
Jeff?
that shouldn't be an issue. Yes.
I have a question for Steve. Steve, is that, removing that one item, is that contractually obligated? Is that how the solicitor looked at it?
he didn't say anything, but it was brought up, I believe, Councilman Vadney brought it up. And Jeff mentioned to him that because they have not actually pursued that task yet, at all, it was kind of mutually suggested. We looked at it and said, well, we don't really need the market analysis. And they as well said, well, the third party that we were looking to hire to do the market analysis, we haven't even been able to do that yet, meaning Weston and Sampson. So we kind of mutually agreed that it would be okay to remove that. So that's where we said, you know, we need to get something in writing to modify the
Right,
contract.
Right. So you don't foresee any issue with them balking at that at all?
Not unless we, I'm assuming not unless we get it in writing.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, for us, in our business, it's standard fare. The town should just issue a change order with a credited amount, say that this work has been withdrawn from the agreement, and if both parties execute that document, that's legally binding.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, because Carolyn has mentioned it in emails, not in a formal capacity, that she's gonna not move forward with that task, there shouldn't be any issue with it.
And I do believe reading in the Weston and Sampson contract, there was, I thought there was something in the contract as far as if both parties mutually agree on something, whatever it is in the contract, that warrants the ability to have it changed.
Amend accordingly, basically.
I'm sorry?
Amend accordingly.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
So just to clarify what I'm seeing here, so a number of items are, 16%, 30% complete, and this is as of basically the end of August.
Right.
So I'm assuming we're going to see another invoice for September that is the remainder of these, bringing everything minus the market analysis to 100%.
Correct.
So by the end of this, we should see the total 83,000 roughly minus the 8,550 for the market analysis. That's
Yep.
what we're looking at? Okay.
Yep. And then, again, my recommendation to the board is also to do it less the amount for the final town council meeting as well. So it would be a reduction of the 2,991 for the July invoice, and essentially make that 1,658, so then there would be 1,333 remaining.
One further question, I heard it, but maybe it didn't register. The provisions are for them to meet with the council once or twice?
Twice.
That was my question. Based on everything that I've read and absorbed, and the displays and everything that we have currently, it begs the question whether or not they need to appear more than once. I can understand them giving you the summary, walking you through this complex analysis, summarizing it as they go, and then leaving you with, here are your 5 best scenarios that we can offer you. And because frankly, in addition to the money, I don't know that further engagement is going to give us necessarily what we think we want, based on their performance so far.
Right, so I think between the public charrette, the Pumpkin Fest, and the fact that every town council meeting, I was consistently giving an update of what was going on. Jeff would frequently attend them, whether they were virtually or in person, also adding to that. So I feel as though, aside from giving the final presentation, just similar to what they did last week, I believe, with the police station report, I think that, to answer your question, yes, I think just 1 would warrant it. I think 2 would be overkill. I think it'd be almost too repetitive. And I think at this point, if we've done everything leading up to it, where we've brought the town council up to speed pretty much every week or every other week as far as where the progress was, I agree. I mean, there's really no need to have 2 town council meetings other than just one with the final report, which is why we're here tonight, is to go over that.
And I would also say,
Weston and Sampson.
Weston and Sampson has attended 5 of our meetings. So I was gonna say, because they didn't appear for a progress report in front of town council, kind of during the midway point, I would say that we would accept that we had 5 meetings and 1 town council meeting instead of 4 Hallowell review meetings and 2 town council meetings.
Oh, so therefore, it's.
It balances out,
Oh,
yeah.
that's fine. I just didn't wanna go beyond if it
Nope,
was not
no,
gonna be productive,
no.
so.
So are there any other questions? Any other comments? Okay, so, because I have all my math written down here, I will make a motion that we recommend to town council the July invoice less, the, task 8 meetings, and adjust that to 1,658 for the meetings, because they still have the town council meeting remaining. And then, the second part of that will be that we accept the, and recommend the August invoice as well. So that's my motion.
I guess an amendment or a clarification, should we include the recommendation to the town council to issue a change order credit? Or you want to make that separate action?
No, I think we already discussed the change of the contract last meeting, and we've made those recommendations in motion, so I think we just need to, it's just.
Okay, then I
filed.
second your motion.
I got a question.
Okay, yes.
Does the town council know we're gonna ask for a credit of $85.50?
Yes.
On the overall, they know that?
Yes, yep,
In writing, they know that?
yep.
That's my question. In writing.
We are requesting that we get it in writing from Weston and
Okay.
Sampson, yes.
Yep.
Have we got it in writing from us?
From us, yes, it was in my recommendation
that's
letter to the
right.
town
Yeah.
That's all I
council.
want you to-
That's
thank
right.
you.
Yep,
As long
okay.
as you've got it in writing, 'cause sometimes people forget said verbally. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion by myself and a second from Mr. Nigerian. Are we all in favor?
I just have one last question.
Okay.
I just have one question.
Okay.
So what's the net amount that we're going to be reserving for a last payment after all services are rendered?
So, let me grab a calculator here. It's gonna be something to the tune of $30,000 that
Okay,
we're still
okay,
outstanding.
so enough where they will
Oh, yeah,
show up
yeah.
to a town council meeting?
Yep.
Okay,
yeah, because like Chris said, they still have their September invoice that would essentially bring all of these to 100%. Okay, so, are we all in favor?
aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. So that is that for the invoices. Why don't we move over to the draft final report? It was a pretty lengthy document. Has everybody had a chance to at least skim through it?
Yep.
Okay. Let me pull it up on my end here. Does anyone have any big picture items that we feel we should discuss? I picked out some grammatical things. They say single instead of shingle.
Well, one thing, I mean, I've read from page 7 to page 29, all but the minutia and the other things.
Mhm.
And in all of their assessments, I never see a reference to compliance with the current insulation codes, which would significantly alter the construction of both the walls and the roof. And they do indicate that any additional dead load, weight applied to the roof, which would include some minor pounds per square foot for insulation, would need a structural analysis. But through this whole report, unless I'm mistaken, I do not remember reading one word relative to code compliant insulation. And why on earth would a municipality of all decide to skirt state and local code? So that begs the question, why didn't you reference it? And what is the implications to all of your recommendations if you do?
Mhm.
In addition, ensure ADA compliance, that's as you know, that's an extremely broad reference when you're talking about an existing building. And it has the potential for significant structural alterations conceivably. If every bathroom is non-compliant, it's going to have a significant impact on any decision that you want to make relative to potential reuse. So I just find that that needs to be given a little bit more oomph. You know, what is the magnitude of that statement? I mean, I understand it, you do, and others may, but it truly is a significant statement that needs to be qualified, I think.
Yeah, to
Appreciate that, thank you. They do get into some on page 25, some level of cost considerations and try to put a number to a little bit of it, but it seems like every building, and I'm not gonna call it boilerplate, but when you go through it, the concerns are the same in every single building. Just go down the list all the way through. So I would offer, looks to me like they were pretty thorough. And at the same time, it looks to be a little bit overwhelming as to what we're looking at in utilizing existing facilities.
Well, I think another 2 points in kind of following and also new is we've spoke about this repeatedly, the structural assessment, even if it's purely a visual assessment of exposed structural members. I see with the laundry list of items that is cut and pasted
Yeah.
essentially. I see no reference, doesn't mean they're not accurate, I just mean that never do I see the word structural integrity. So we were supposed to get at least a base level summary from a structural engineer, short of opening up the finished roofing to access the main frames. And the other thing that dawns on me is, as daunting as this can read, I was kind of hoping that, remember we had talked about a ratings system? We had repeatedly gone back and forth with her, indicating that, you know, when this minutia is all put in front of us, can we not get an objective analysis that says likely viability of upgrade and reuse, 1 through 5, et cetera, et cetera? Because right now, other than the litany of things, there's no conclusion that says, with all due respect, with the amount of what we're looking at, the likelihood that this structure could be made functional is, in our opinion, it's only their opinion we're asking because they're being paid as the professionals, is 50%, 70, whatever gauge they want to use. Because in addition to us providing this information to the public to substantiate what we've been doing for the last few months, this also substantiates decisions that we're going to recommend to the council and that they'll eventually make as to what we do. So I think most people, whether they have a construction background or not, focused people would look at some point and say, well, what about the structure? Is it going to fall down? I understand it needs all those other things, but is the structure safe or is it unsafe? Do we think we can get that added?
We can certainly ask. I know we have been asking for that multiple times when they've been here, so it does come as a surprise that they haven't put some level of that thought behind it. It also, one of the things that popped out to me was one of the meetings that we did have, we asked her about buildings 1 through 4, and she had said it was the professional's opinion that they're not worth saving, and that's not anywhere to be found in the report. So, you know, those are they do list out all of the recommendations that would need to make the buildings functional, but the recommendation that's missing is it worth it? Is this building, they've already said to us before, buildings 1 through 4 are not worth saving, so why aren't we applying that metric to the remainder of the buildings?
I want to just add to what Bob's saying in this whole discussion. One thing we can get out of spending $75,000 with this report is to be able to say to the community, in the mind of a professional engineering company, these buildings are not worth saving. Therefore, we should tear the area down and go with a new project. I think they should give us some overall direction on the total property, and so that we can hang our hat on it, one way or the other. And I may be wrong with what I just said, but I think they should give us, in summary, the review of Hallowell, school is, the structures are too far gone, will cost too much to bring up to all proper compliances, and it would be our recommendation that these properties be torn down.
Well, Bob, you're absolutely right, because as looking through this report, my one focus was building 10, because we had talked about early on, there were groups that wanted to get in, the seniors, what is the viability in the short term of that building? And we have a litany of things that are wrong with it, no sprinkler system, old electrical, mold, a lot of things that need to be fixed. So whether that building or any of the buildings will remain in the long term, reading this, my thought was, what about the short term? What can we get out of this report that can guide us to see, is it viable in the short term to get groups in there? And while they listed the problems, I'm not sure we're left with any solutions.
Well, I think if we, I don't think it's ironic that the police station report just came out just this past week and was presented to town council, and essentially they came up with three more or less scenarios. One, what does it take to just provide the bare minimums for the police station? It was a very minimal cost, but at least we have an idea. Second one was, what does it cost to bring the entire station up to code, keeping the existing building? And there was a price tag on that. And then the third one was, what is the cost if we just build a completely new, knock it down, completely new police station? And when you looked at the price tag between the full renovation, bringing it up to full code as it should be, versus a new one, it was less than $1 million in cost. And the overall price tag initially was around 17 million. So when you look at it that way, I think that we almost need something similar from Weston and Sampson, and I'm not quite sure whether they're not providing that. I don't know if they feel as though there might be some sort of liability involved in doing that, but I definitely think, as Bob said and others, I think if we provided that, then I think at least it would allow the people in town to kind of understand more of the project.
So
If you, just to follow up quick, for Scott's point about building 10, I mean, I checked off 6 things that if I'm if I'm Carl or Carrie Anderson over at building, those 6 things I see and I say, no, nobody's accessing this building. until these 6 things are fixed, and that is electrical panels. They made it very clear that they are a known fire hazard. Fire alarm systems are not up to grade, emergency lighting, exit signs, and the mold remediation. So right off the bat, that's building 10. Right off the bat, we've answered the question only by pulling it. So the question should be summarized to say, for these reasons, this building cannot be used by anyone until these items are brought to code, and we would expect, why on earth, you know, if we're not going to use building 10 as a long-term, why are we going to replace, you know, a $15,000 fire alarm system or a, you know, $50,000 in mold remediation for something that, while yes, we have many people that would like to use it and they have great reasons to wanting to use it, but we're not doing our job if we say, yeah, go ahead, well, another year while we're kicking this around the block. But we should be given that summary that says, look, right here are the 6 reasons that you can give to your people that says you really can't use building 10, et cetera, et cetera.
So I think at this point, what I'm hearing a lot of is we're missing an executive summary on this report. Basically, the conclusions that they found, all of the other parts of the report are would back up that executive summary, but I think that's the big thing that's missing here. I'm glad that the police station went ahead of us, because that's really what the MBRTF went through. Did I say that right? Yeah, MBRTF is really the next step that we're going to be going into. They had the Tecton architects be able to go through and dial a little bit further into, okay, you know, they need all these systems with mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection. They put costs to the wall construction. They actually used the cost estimator that I've used before and trust pretty well. He's actually very accurate, oddly enough. But the police station report is really going to be our next step. That's what we will be going into for our next final product. This is really our first final product. The next one will be the next step into going a little deeper.
Jeff, I have a question in that regard, and you could probably answer it best. So is this report at this point in time, or what the expectation of is there, once they're completely done 100% of their scope, is that something whoever the town brings on board to design, whatever architect that is that something they should be able to use as part of their scope? And are we there yet? And do you foresee us getting there?
I think so. I think all of the comments that we're talking about tonight is just going to help further refine the report that we've been given thus far. So if we can just get, it's like we're in the race and we're right at the finish line. We see it for like the last, 100 yards, and we're in that last 100-yard stretch. And it's just these little finite things that just make these reports that much stronger. So, like I said, all these comments that we're, in the discussions that we're having are really good, because this is essentially a partnership with Weston and Sampson to really form this report. So then that way we do have something that we can point to and say, this is why we're deciding X, Y, and Z. Mm-hmm. So it's going to be crucial that we get the executive level summary on recommendations for keeping or not keeping the buildings.
Yep. So the closest that we've gotten to that in this report is page 25, which is the cost considerations. And they're kind of doing it in a narrative way, which it's not entirely helpful. And they're calling out a few things that are, particularly big cost drivers, which is the electrical, the bathrooms, and the sprinkler systems. Also the paving with the parking lot and the driveway. But they're not really doing it in a way that's entirely easy to understand. What I'd love to see them do is take this page and put it in a table of, here are the buildings, here are all of the considerations, and here's the projected cost for each of those for each building. I'm a little bit wary that we're ever going to get an answer from them on whether or not we should keep the buildings or not. If you look at the first paragraph of this page, they're talking about, you know, they're sort of wishy-washy in that people assume that renovation is cheaper than new construction, but it's not always. And there's this line, the town must weigh whether the end product justifies the expense. They're putting that decision on us. If we throw it back to them and say, well, should we keep these buildings or not, they're going to say that's not our decision. You know, I'd hoped that they would get us to that point in their answer in a previous meeting when we asked straightforwardly, are any of these buildings worth keeping? They said, well, buildings 1 to 4, probably not. That's not included here, and I'm wondering if they're sort of walking that back and not making that summary for us. So we can ask that. I'm not sure we're going to get it, though.
Well, I think they're also, I think, on your point, Chris, I think they're also focusing on the nostalgia of the school itself. And, you know, and I get it, but to our point, and clearly, you know, through the survey that we did, people don't want to sell it, they want to keep it. People, although they love what Hallowell offered them over the decades, that it was extremely active, we realize that we're in a phase right now where it may just not be feasible to renovate, you know, and so I think that based on Weston and Sampson's professional approach, they have to give us somewhat of a black and white professional answer.
I think in it, oh, go ahead.
So, I think, I've asked before, I asked her directly, and I kind of got the implication that they're not going to give us an answer, and that they're not going to go one way or the other. And the other part of this is this in draft form? Because if we're asking them to do more of an executive summary, that's asking them to do more work. And this is, yeah, I mean, like how much more?
Was it a draft?
Is this a draft version, or are they gonna they're gonna bill us for more hours and end up with something that is gonna be just as wishy-washy as before? And if so, what about the concept of just taking what we have now and giving it to another architectural firm and just say, hey, could we pay them, you know, $1,000 to read over this? In your professional opinion, can you give us an answer? And take Weston and Sampson out of the picture completely. Because they do have that bias about that. They have they've been dreaming this whole time. There's not actual numbers to go with it. And it doesn't make any sense to me why we continuously go through what could be when it's clear that it's beyond repair.
Well, did they define it as a draft?
I defined it as a draft for them because they submitted it to us, and we haven't seen all of these components together.
Right.
The way that I typically work is before a final report is considered final, you send it to the client, us, to review, comment, and then they finalize it. So that's how I'm moving this forward.
I don't think by any stretch that an executive summary should cost a dime. That is part of the process.
Okay.
Well, if they seem to think otherwise, then we'll need to, we have the ability to tell them that they're wrong. So I would encourage that you define the executive summary to be inclusive of some of the comments. Right. And one question for you as an architectural professional, because it does beg the question. No matter what building makes it through the cut, if you will, at what point don't we also have to consider the architectural integrity or design standard of a structure that is that old and in that shape relative to trying to attach something to it that would be satisfying and pleasing and more contemporary? Isn't that a worthy consideration for you as an architect? Isn't that a key component? And the reason I bring it up is that there's no reference to that here at all, that these structures, which to the average person don't look like they belong in the Northeast, So do they belong in the Northeast even longer than they've been here? So that's another question that's always been in my mind. Because we want to be able to drive down that road, whenever that is, and say, ah, darn,
So,
I
actually-
got it right.
60 years is pretty good then, right?
Yeah, the cycle will come back by the time it's mature again. So, what's your opinion, actually? I don't want to get off topic, but do you have an opinion?
After reading this report, and I spent quite a few nights more than I'd like to admit, reading this over, to me, my conclusion is that these buildings are not worth saving. That is as an architect, my view, my position. I don't think it's worth saving those buildings. I understand the nostalgia that is connected to it. I understand the campus feel. But there is the ability that we can redesign and recreate some aspects of Hallowell that are so well loved amongst the community. We can continue to have covered pathways that aren't corrugated metal tops and rusted metal posts and aren't 6 foot 5 inches tall, which is not code compliant. We can be able to do that. We can look at all the historic photos, all the photos that we've taken since, give those to an architect, and they can come up with a vision of recreating some of that nostalgia. We can also come up with a pretty cool-looking building, too. You know, North Smithfield has a very historic, we're right in Slatersville here. We have a very historic nature of this area. Hallowell is secluded enough that if we wanted to do something a little bit more modern and mix in something, we can do that, too. And still, it's a steel structure that will stand as long as the high school has stood for, which was built 10 years later from Hallowell. So, my opinion after reading this report and my conclusion that I've come to is that with all of the money that we would have to dump into all of those individual buildings and the uses that we've been hearing about from the community, we're trying to fit a square peg into a circle hole. And I don't think it's going to be, in the long run, a proper investment for this town. And that's what this is going to be. It's where we're going to be asking people to invest in the town because we don't have a community center. We don't have a senior center. So we're going wildly off topic. So I'm just going to dial that back, though.
Well,
And
that's why it's nice to have an architect on the board. Now we don't need to pay one $1,000 to read that and thoughtfully give us a response. So there we go.
Well, we had to get the answer somehow.
Right.
If I could bring it back, I do have something big that I would like them to address, because I don't think we can publish this as is. I had NRI reach out to me yesterday looking for a map of the wetlands on the site. And if you look at page 71 on this, and 71 through 74, it's the wetlands map that we had at Pumpkin Fest, which shows part of Lindy's in the property line. I don't want that to go out into the public and be the face of an NRI article, and then people are going, what is this structure in the southern part of the site?
So I would just say, make sure you read the legend. Because the red area.
That's the investigation area.
Is the
Oh, see, I
investigation
didn't even know that.
area, not the property line.
Well,
So
that's
that could be
confusing,
one additional overlay into this map that shows the property line as
Yep.
opposed, because they have the CAD to be able to overlay the lot lines.
Yeah.
So that can be an easy, that
Yeah,
should be
please,
able to be an
let's-
easy fix.
Let's ask them to do that, because if I was confused about it, I'm sure other people will be.
Okay.
Another issue for the executive summary, even if we had to only choose 3, if they're going to give us those 5 potential scenarios, and if we only wanted 2 conceivably, shouldn't they at least give us a cost estimate for both of them to say, this is what you would expect the range to be if you chose Model 4, or that seemed to be the favorite one. There's no dollar value assigned
Yeah.
to that.
Are they gonna say that's the part of the analysis we're pulling out?
No, that's market analysis.
But can they do that not knowing what those buildings will be precisely? You can say community center, but what does that entail? What exactly is inside the
Well,
walls?
they can throw numbers at it. I mean, I
Okay.
do it every day. I mean, you make certain assumptions and you define what your assumptions are. And you say, based on these assumptions, this is what you could expect to pay.
So I feel like this draft is like reading a suspense novel, and the last 3 pages are ripped out,
Yeah, exactly.
you know?
Good point.
Yeah. You know, Jeff,
will say, I believe, I'd have to go back and look at the contract, that they do owe some sort of financial feasibility analysis for the concepts. And I believe there's 2 that are in the contract. So financial feasibility is gonna be very different than a cost estimate that you and I are used to seeing. So there's probably, and that is going to be a wildly open range of numbers.
Sure.
So at this point, we have they have clearly outlined all the items that would cost money based on renovations to these buildings. I think that's a good start. But I think it will be very hard, at least for me, this would be very hard without knowing what the buildings look like, what's going on in the buildings. They could probably do a feasibility analysis for the site work, but as far as buildings go, that's gonna be very dependent on materiality, what we choose, the design of it, all that other stuff. So I think those would be garbage numbers.
To build upon what you said, Jeff, when you're giving your analysis, and Chris mentioned it too, page 25, the cost considerations, I think if I were not sitting amongst us and out in the general population, the community, I'd want to see exactly these cost considerations enumerated in a spreadsheet. So details on every building with every line item, electrical, plumbing, fire protection. So I think that's the easiest way to explain to someone who's considering, do we keep it? Do we tear it down? How to move, if you have those numbers, hard numbers in a spreadsheet for each building, it'd be easy to look at. And personally, that's my biggest expectation from having gone through this report. I'd like to see some more detail, specifically figures.
I think if we have that, we can almost do what Robert's saying ourselves by looking at, what each building offers, square footage or whatever, versus the cost to renovate it, right? And you can say, well, does it seem viable or not, right? Is it a 1 or is it a 5?
Yeah, I think we could probably, if we came back in a meeting and really spent some time reading, we could probably create that ourselves, but it would be worthy of them. They have the same information, because I guess the other question is going to be, when you take all of this together, if we get the executive summary, we'll review it, then they'll go to the council for their presentation, or they'll just go with the executive summary. And then, at some point, does the council kick it back to us and say, what is this committee's recommendation, or is the council just going to take the final report and then choose a path forward?
I think at this point, it would be that Weston and Sampson would present their executive summary and their findings based on what we've seen on their report this far. And then we would, I would, follow the example of the MBRTF. They've asked that the town council accept the report. And then during that time between presentation of Weston and Sampson's presentations to the council, acceptance of the report, we can meet and come up with our final recommendations. Because I think I might be stepping ahead of the game a little bit, because my recommendation to the town council, or what I would like to see be our next recommendation to the town council, is that we go into the RFQ process for the next design iteration. So,
Hey, to clarify on timing here, they're tentatively scheduled for,
we haven't
to make,
scheduled.
we haven't scheduled it yet,
that.
okay.
No.
All right.
I said maybe the town council's next meeting on October 18th, but I think it's gonna warrant that we see these revisions before they go to town council. I don't think it's gonna be, I don't wanna waste town council's time. I wanna make sure that they have the final report. I don't want to say, here are the revisions, please make them and be ready to present it to the, I'm gonna micromanage a little bit and say, we wanna see the final report and accept it from you before it goes to town council.
Would
Yeah,
would
sorry.
it make any sense for, when we were at Pumpkin Fest, we got, appeared to me to be excellent response from multiple people. A lot of comments, a lot of stickers. Do we want to give them, I saw the results of the survey, but do we want to give them the results from Pumpkin Fest and say that, do we also then want to say that it's this committee's opinion that we like Model 4 or Model 3 or whatever it was, and have them expand upon that? Or do we want to leave it wide open, just give them the results from the Pumpkin Fest to supplement the survey results, and then present that to the council saying, here's the overwhelming, because my point is, if they gave us the models, and we put the models out to the community, and we got real feedback, shouldn't the council may know of this just by being there or offhand, but they haven't been told in a formal way that 50 people picked model scheme 2 or scheme 3. You see what I mean? Because then, of course, it'll also mean that we're giving the people who took the time to give their opinion, and the survey people, they're getting a front position because they're the ones who gave us their opinion. So is there a way for Weston and Sampson to incorporate the results from Pumpkin Fest?
I think if we provide all the information to them, they could tie that in as an appendix to the report. Because I was also gonna ask that they put in the survey results as an appendix into this report. I know they weren't directly involved with it, but they have the PDF, which can simply just be dropped and put in place. So, I mean, if I need to provide them the language that, concepts 1 through 5 were presented at the town's Pumpkin Fest, we had 94 votes, 40 were for concept 5, 20 were for concept 3, 14 for concept 4, and 10 for concepts 1 and 2. And then we've gotten 25 additional comments and write what they are. I think they can copy and paste that into an appendix as well.
One of the things I was just going to add, so I don't know if any of you did get a chance to see the municipal police station report, but it was very thorough. They had, towards the end, a couple of renditions of different concepts of what a police station would look like. Again, really based on 2 scenarios. One, taking the existing station and modifying it, bringing it, again, up to code. And then another one where it was basically leveled and a new police station was there. It was really, the task force was designed to come up with only those scenarios, not necessarily then hitting it, sending it off to residents to get more feedback on which one they wanted. It was more or less taking that data and knowing, okay, these are the 2 scenarios that we have at hand. And obviously there's a small third one if we just want to spend a little bit of money here. And I would kind of relate that to if we were looking to just dump a little bit of money into building 10 just to be able to use it, which we may only be able to use it for a couple of years during the intermediary stage. But anyway, so then then what we had talked about at the town council meeting on Monday is we have to then become a unified front. So not only does the Hallowell Review Committee have to become a unified front in what they recommend to town council, but then town council has to be a unified front on what they foresee as the best option. And what would be the opposite of that is if we went to bond or let's say come the election in November, we put it on the ballot for residents to choose, do you want option A or option B? That could cause even more decisiveness. So I think if we keep that mindset of, you know, we're really on task to gather the information and as a committee, make our own recommendations based on the feedback we've already gotten, not to then ask for more feedback when we already have the results that we obviously were paying for.
I think it also should be noted that there's no language in here for the layperson. We're not considering operational costs. We haven't even begun to discuss that, and there's no language in saying if we keep the structure as it is, operational costs of maintaining heat in all these different buildings, it's gonna be this, and if we were to do it this way, just to make sure that the layperson in the public would understand, it's gonna cost you $100,000 a year to keep this going, or it's gonna cost you something like that.
Unfortunately, I think that's outside of their contract.
Okay.
For operational costs.
I guess,
But I understand your point.
what's our topic currently, so I don't wanna get off too far, but,
Commenting on the draft report from Weston and Sampson.
and do we have any other, I didn't print the agenda, but, because I didn't,
I mean, we have some other items. I put the RFQ and the RFP back on the agenda to continue talking about. If we have the community outreach, if anybody has any updates. We did invite student council to come, but it doesn't look like they're here tonight, so.
well, I guess one question, I guess it relates to this. What does this committee do after the final report with the executive summary is presented to the town council? What, are we just in limbo? What do we do?
What I would like to see us do is have the final report from Weston and Sampson, have the acceptance of the report from the town council. At that point, we make our recommendation of, you know, we think it would be best if we go with, you know, concepts 5 and 3 were strongly preferred during our Pumpkin Fest. We would like to now engage in an architectural and engineering services contract so that we can be going into the next level of design. At that point, that's where we'd kind of be segueing into our next topic of a conversation, is we would be interviewing and hiring an architect to come in, do a conceptual design, meet with the public so we can identify uses that are gonna go on inside this building, what the building looks like, what the preference is we'd have some more community input meetings. But at that point, we'd be drilling down a little bit more. And then at the end of that process, that architect and engineering firm, company combination, will be putting together a cost estimate based on our guidance and the feedback from the community based on those couple community meetings. And then we will have hard numbers of what, you know, concepts 3 and 5 could cost.
And that's assuming that the council agrees that they like either or both.
Either or both, yeah. And that's how I wrote the RFQ. Why don't we wrap up any other comments on Weston and Sampson's report, and then we can kind of slide into the request for qualifications conversation. What I am going to do is, because we are streaming this live via YouTube, I am going to share our meeting with Weston and Sampson and say, here are some comments that I've written down, but please take a listen, understand where the comments are coming from, what the committee would like to see, and please incorporate that as much as you can into your report. Please let me know what issues you have providing some of the things that we've asked for so that we are aware of it. And then if we need to figure out a course of action, we can do that after the fact. But I'm going to send them the link to just view. They'll hear for themselves what we've all said. And then the additional comments, there were a few that I had, grammatical stuff, because I'm a stickler for that stuff, that I'll send along in a marked up PDF as well.
Just for just a brief, maybe just to get everyone's opinion, I'm trying to find it. I had highlighted it. There is a statement made early on that essentially says there's not nearly as much land here that is developable as you may have thought, given the wetland constrictions so I think that's a bombshell sentence,
Yes.
accurate as it may be. But the only thing I may add is that if you're going to make that statement,
You need to
you
give a
need to
percentage.
embellish it and expand upon it. What do you mean? Do you mean that only the models that you provided are buildable, that would work, but nothing else really will? Any structure larger than that, you're really gonna be pushing it.
Yep.
And I don't think they gave enough to the second egress. They didn't give enough attention. They did discuss it, but they weren't terribly definitive as to what would work and what wouldn't work. And,
Okay.
you know, we know that fire has already indicated that they would want a second egress, so it should be in the base design from now on,
Yep.
so that we don't get waylaid by a review after
Yeah,
the fact.
and that was one of the things that I highlighted as well, is that, yes, you make the statement that there's a lot of wetlands, but can we at least get an accurate percentage of, okay, we have 35 acres down there, how many acres are wetlands and unusable? Put a number to it so that people can understand that number, because there's a lot of wetlands could mean various things to various people, because it's just a very subjective statement. We need a very factual statement. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, the other thing too is even though we can't put a structure on it, is, maybe recommendations from them. Is there anything that we can do that would be allowable? Walking trails, things along
Right.
those lines,
Yeah.
that they can recommend. So at least, to Bob's point, maybe it's only 25% of the land is usable for structural, but yet, all the other areas, you can put this, and this on the property.
Well, they showed the trails, but the last thing I'll say is that they gave, yeah, I give them credit, because they put it out there, and we'd be fools if we didn't at least acknowledge it, and the council's the one that would have to weigh in. They gave you the opportunity to look at the upper section of the property, which is essentially lopped off as a function of wetlands. It can never be connected to the main lower property for any reasonable use. So they put it out there for you. Wow, you could sell the street side of it, or steadfastly hold it as just conservation or open land. But they did spend a little bit of time with their analysis to give you that opportunity, and whether you see it as a ability to pick up a little bit of money, or if we see it as a terrible thing, we can't do that because we're giving, you were selling it, we wouldn't be giving it to anybody. But so I'd be curious to see if the council even bites at that, or if you just discount that entirely.
Aren't we talking about basically the hill?
Essentially, yes.
I mean, my own personal view, which I don't speak on behalf of the council, but my own personal view is the little money that you would make on that, to me, doesn't justify the headaches,
Well, I guess the other question I would ask, and this would be for you, Mr. Najarian, is, are these lots made up according to the zoning bylaws?
Well, they spent some time, would have to look at it, but of
Because I don't
course-
want to be creating any non-conforming
Of
lots.
course, Well, that's more planning than zoning. I mean,
Yeah.
when you create it, that's on your bailiwick, but, I would think that, the zoning board would always look favorably upon anything that the town wanted to do that was reasonable. I mean, I think any member who was acting would always want to do what was in the best interest of the town, since that is our job.
To go back to what Rob said about that statement at the beginning of this, they said it's apparent that the envelope for building is severely limited, which I read that, I was like, whoa, what does that mean? I would like them to walk that back, because there are 11 buildings on this site right now, so I don't know if I would consider that severely limited. I mean, it just feels like really excessive language for what they're trying to say.
What page is that?
It's on page 24. I would also say that scattered in a few places throughout there are references to security cameras and the state of them. and I'm wondering if we want that to be in a public report. I'm imagining somebody Googling Hallowell security, and up pops this, informing them of a few things that we might not want them to see.
Well, you just let the cat out of the bag now, because
Well,
we're
it's,
on
you know,
YouTube.
it's in a video. You can't exactly Google it, but
At this point in the game, you know, if someone's determined enough to go down there and cause some mischief, they're gonna be determined enough to go down there.
All right.
I think it's just gonna be an unfortunate reality. Okay, if there are no other comments, we will continue forward. Does anybody, I'm a little hesitant to ask if anybody else has anything else. Okay. All right, so next item on our agenda is for discussion, review, and action, request for qualifications for hazardous materials, request for qualifications for conceptual/schematic design services for the property. So this was, again, one of those things that is really going to be our next step. And I want to get this, I don't want to lose our momentum that we're having with this committee. I want to make sure that we are, you know, continuing to move forward, and this would really be the next step after Weston and Sampson completes their work, presents to town council the acceptance of the final report. It would be my belief that the next step is that we put out the request for qualifications to get architects and engineers to submit basically everything that's in this RFQ that I sent over to everybody. I used the request for qualifications that the MBRTF used to get Tecton architects. So a lot of the legal language is already there. So what I really want to make sure, I want to bring more of your attention to is the project scope of, and this is the scope of work that's a typical of this sort of project at this level. It would be what's called a conceptual design, and I've really just kind of listed out A through L, all of the things that we would like to see. You know, it's going to be our recommendation on the concepts that are chosen. If we do, in fact, recommend that we're going to reuse one of the buildings, it's going to be required that they basically perform an existing conditions. So they go around with a measuring tape and measure every wall, window, verify the location of everything, and basically come up with a floor plan and elevations and all the information that's required to do that. Another, on B, a typical thing that would be of this is providing floor plans, elevations, and sections, so we get to get an idea of the room layout, what the building front looks like. Sections are just basically, if you were to take a cake, cut it in half, pull it apart, that's what you see as a section. And then I also asked for providing 2 to 3 options to review aesthetics, room layouts, adjacencies, space planning needs. So that's basically saying, okay, we have a conference room. There's, you know, how many people are in here? 82 people that are going to be in here. That means you need 2 toilets for the occupants of this room. So we have 2 toilets over in the back. So it's really starting to identify, you know, the plumbing needs, the mechanical needs of a certain size building. You guys can see all the registers that are in this room. That was, you know, figured out, that sort of thing. And adjacencies is basically, if you have certain rooms that have, like, let's say we have a yoga room, we're obviously going to need some locker rooms. So those are going to want to be close by to each other instead of on separate ends of the building, that sort of thing. I'm also asking for a phasing plan if that's applicable. It might not be if we are going with concept 5. If we're doing a couple buildings, it might be worth having them figure out a phasing plan, because that's going to factor in for cost. That's going to be one of the big things. We have mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection, and structural narratives. That gives the cost estimator an idea of, you know, how much steel is going to be used, what kind of mechanical systems are going to be used. If I am boring you guys, just say so. So it's just basically words that can have numbers associated with them so we can figure out costs.
No, I think, I didn't print them, but I read them when you sent them. I mean, I think it's very well prepared. You know, you're certainly using your expertise and your professionalism, and it's to the town's benefit, so I endorse it 100% for both the asbestos, so we can assign, at least we can identify the magnitude, and then get the pricing based on that report, and then the design. I think maybe the other, because you know, it dawns on me as part of this RFP or RFQ, which will eventually end up, when we get the new design firm on board, we could essentially throw out all of the concepts and say to them, give us your opinion. We'll give you these two. We liked what we got. You can use this as your baseline.
Right.
And give us your opinion. Walk around the site, do everything you're supposed to do, and let us know. And also, the other thing we never got was an overlay that would say, relative to the available land, if you blew every building up, these are the maximum number of buildings you could put in any way, shape, or form. Because, you know, we were still kicking around, is the YMCA idea?
I believe they're coming to the next meeting.
Yeah.
So that's still viable.
Absolutely.
It hasn't been ruled out. So the idea that we're gonna have more than one structure still needs to be kept afloat.
Yep.
So, I mean, I endorse 100%. I think we should move forward with what you're doing, and I don't think we should feel that because whatever we spent, the 80-odd thousand, was not wasted. It got us to a point where we can legitimize ourselves, substantiate some decisions, and process forward. Hopefully, we find a design team that's worthy of taking it to the next level where we can go with them to
Right.
that point. And we can just use whatever we've been given to date as just a foundation. to go
Exactly,
from. So
exactly.
I endorse 100% what you've done.
So I mean, and some of these items that I've called out, attendance at one Hallowell review meeting per month at minimum, and providing a full project schedule with dates and deliverables. Those are things that we will be able to use and hold folks to when we bring them on board. And then that way, we know exactly when we're getting all of these different things, what the timeline is expected to be, when we're gonna be having. They, in a sense, determine the schedule for us. Because we don't have any, at this point in the game, we don't have any hard deadlines. It sounds like if things were going to go to bond, where this next election cycle in November, we're past that point already, from the way Councilor Vadney explained the process for the police station. So we're still wanting to move efficiently, but we don't have a hard deadline that we need to be done by this date to make sure we have all of our numbers in a row. I think we have a little bit more flexibility. So,
If I could just step in and say, I agree with Bob that I fully endorse this. As a layperson, not in the industry, I can't really comment. I'm going to fully trust in your professional qualifications that this is what we want to get out of it, but I do agree that what we got out of Western and Sampson got us from one point to the next step, almost like a game of Candyland. We went from one square to the next colored square. Now we're going to ready to move to the next step, get a little more specific, and I think this is the step we need to take, so I fully endorse the moving forward on all of it.
Yeah.
all right, and then, yes, go ahead.
Any idea on a budget range for something like this?
You know, I meant to look at some earlier projects that my office has done, and I totally blanked on getting there. So we have done some that have landed us at $30,000 for a quick feasibility, but that was at a much smaller scale. On the other hand, let's see, let me think. We could be upwards of, you know, another $80,000 proposal, which I would expect for this level of work. And it wouldn't surprise me in the least at that, for all the items that we're looking at, but I'm trying to think where we were on some of the other the other thing is, this is a much bigger project than some of the ones that I've ever worked on. So I've worked on quite a few, but this project is truly unique in the fact that we have such a massive site. So to kind of do apples to apples is a little difficult for me.
I think you have to be prepared for a total of close to 100, inclusive of all the design, because just to think about it, part of this is gonna be, if you saw any of the references to drainage and lack thereof, and the fact that it currently all discharges into the wetlands, which is, not acceptable.
Problematic.
There's an extensive amount of money that's gonna be required for site drainage, depending on how the paved area is defined in the end. So there's multiple issues, the driveway issue with the sidewalks and the guardrails and all of those hard things
Right.
that are in addition to the architectural work. So
Yeah.
I think you're gonna see a number that's
And-
at least, west of
And
what-
through the request for qualifications process, on the last page, there's, the last 2 pages, there's a format, and I've assigned point values to those. So while we, as a committee, go through this process, we're gonna get all these submissions in. Each member will be able to score them accordingly. I'll have a master Excel sheet. We average them out. The firm that has the highest score is typically the one that then we go into negotiations with. So then we can say, you've been selected, let's negotiate out a price, and then, that's gonna be not our purview. We can recommend that, to the town council, we can say, we've reviewed all the submissions, we are recommending firm X to go forward with. We would recommend that, the solicitor, the town administrator, and the council move forward with negotiations with them on terms that would be acceptable to the town.
I think it's a good process. Yep.
It's on topic, but it's off topic also. Should we, I think I had mentioned it once before, should we generate a third one for demolition so that we could get pricing per building?
That would be one of the things that we ask for in their cost estimate
Oh, from them? Okay.
from these folks. Because I have cost estimates for 2 options with escalation and phasing if applicable. So demolition would be included, as well as hazmat would be under our request for proposals. We could get that, because cost estimators tend to like to put the responsibility of removal costs on the hazmat experts.
Because I just think that we should be prepared that once a decision is made, I think it's foolhardy and short-sighted. And once we decide if in fact those buildings are to be destroyed, disbanded, then it begs the question, just get it done so that they no longer create a hazard in any way, shape, or form. The only thing you could argue is whether any foundation, and I doubt it, would be worthy. But given there's probably no vapor barrier, I don't think, so the cost of a foundation to be forced into a dimension that may not work doesn't make sense.
I have 3 questions. So at the end of this, we're left with fully fleshed out concept or costs associated with it that we can then take and seek funding for, right? Okay. Item I under the scope, escalation for myself, maybe for some others here, that's, if a project takes 5 years to get to, 10 years to get to, it's
Exactly.
projected cost over
Exactly.
time.
Yep. So, typically what we do in the industry is we ask, we anticipate a construction date and the construction time. So if this project is gonna take, a year and a half, and we figure where this is all theoretical for anyone listening to you on the online, but say we're ready to go next year, shovels in the ground, and it's gonna be a 1.5-year process. The cost estimator would essentially build in a percentage based on the escalation of cost of materials and labor and all that good stuff to the midpoint of the construction. So it would be essentially escalation until September 2023 if we were to start shovels in the ground January 2023. So that's just, and it gives us an idea of, okay, because we're obviously not gonna start right now, there's a certain percentage associated with that cost that's just gonna keep going up, unfortunately. I don't think I've ever.
It's not gonna go down?
Have you ever seen escalation costs go down?
Not nearly as
So-
fast as they go up.
So then the third question that I had is just about order of operations. So the intention is to have Weston and Sampson come do their final presentation at some point, whether
Yep.
it's 2 weeks from now or a month and a half from now, whatever. Are you intending to, or should we be intending to make the recommendation to move forward with this in sort of one fell swoop? So they do their thing at the same meeting, we're saying, that's all the information, here's where we'd like to go next, and sort of making our recommendation that this is the next step and requesting that the town takes that action?
Let's see. Theoretically, we could recommend that we put this out at the next town council meeting. We could do that, and we could share the draft report with Weston and Sampson. Steve just left, so I don't know what the current feel would be on that. But he knew I was gonna put him on the spot. Ideally, we would have the final report, the acceptance of the final report, and then with that acceptance, we would say, we'd like to go into the next step and put out the RFQ. Because we are gonna probably have an interview process as well. With the top 3 firms, we might request that they come in, and that just become one of the deciding factors. Because I wanna make sure that we also know who we are working with, understand their dynamic. It's always, for us, it's always good to interview with the client, because then they can see how we interact. And then if we need to, we can say, oh, they're a bunch of crazy people, we don't wanna deal with them. I hope that's not the case in North Smithfield, but that's kind of where I would see us going. But I would certainly hope that Weston and Sampson can turn around this in a reasonable amount of time to be ready to present to town council.
I mean, in essence, isn't the acceptance by the town council somewhat of a formality? The report has been prepared. The council has been progressively updated as we've gone through this process.
If there's
That-
no money expended, do we need to,
It's up-
because
yeah.
part of the RFQ is really, we're interviewing on qualifications, not on
Right.
price.
Right.
So as long as there's no money expended, we could we could operate independently with information going up to the town council until that point where we reach where now money needs to be discussed, negotiated, then we need their approval. Is that pretty much how we would have to go?
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Chris. I'm just wondering, I think we should finalize with Weston and Sampson and then go to the RFQ. Because someone might say, you're putting the cart before the horse. Get your report, committee, and then give the person you're gonna ask to design the information from that report and go forward. I really think, I know since time is not that critical, I don't think Weston and Sampson, I question whether Weston and Sampson will have the report done the way we want it in a week. I really do. And so therefore, I wouldn't want the council to have to act on our request for a quote for design until the Weston and Sampson report has been accepted.
How long does the RFQ solicitation process generally take? Are we talking like, a month of putting it out there and sort of collecting those resumes, or like,
It
how
could be,
long is that?
it could be 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
I've seen some that go as long as 6 weeks, but that, that's a little excessive, so.
All right, so just to put like a rough time frame on this, assuming Weston and Sampson can present to the town council, say, a month from now. And we can, either the same night or shortly after that, get them to agree to move forward with the RFQ process. Then we're looking at another month or so of putting that out there, you know, getting firms to apply and sort of going through that interview process. So we're about August, October right now. So we're kind of looking at end of the year before we're making a decision about who we want to engage with.
Which is actually, in the architectural world, it's really probably a good time to start engaging with some folks, because winter tends to be a little bit slower. So just kind of going off of the timeline that you were identifying, you know, we'll send Weston and Sampson the final comments. I would anticipate that we could have the final report for our meeting the 21st, which we could then recommend that town council has their presentation on November 1st. And if on our meeting at the 21st, we make our formal motions to move forward with the RFQ process, we could also make at the November 1st meeting, relay our recommendation to move forward with this RFQ. In the meantime, I can have the solicitor review it, make sure everything is all set and ready to go. And then we essentially have, you know, because Thanksgiving and Veterans Day is thrown in there, we could have let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, basically almost a 5-week period for submissions. Then on our December 2nd meeting, we can review all of them at that time. So we could say that the RFQ deadline would be, you know, let's see, Thanksgiving's the 25th. We could say, you know, the RFQ deadline is November 30th, and we can then distribute all the information, and we can, maybe that might be a little too soon. We'll say the 22nd.
Yeah, but I also think that you should ask pointedly Weston and Sampson to have the summary completed by whatever date
Right.
you feel is necessary. I wouldn't give them the option, let them come back to you and justify a delay.
No.
We're at the 11th hour here. 99.9% of their work has been done. Let's wrap it up and then go from there, because time is never, in this world with us, with design delays and issues and this and that, time is never such that we can just let it slip away without taking advantage of every opportunity we have to try to get something done. The only other thing I was going to hope is when we get a little bit of breathing room, maybe we could have like a workshop so that we have a chance to all just speak freely ahead of any architectural firms presenting in front of us. So we really have a sense of, okay, where are we? What are we envisioning? Each one of us may have our own ideas based on what we've seen, what we've heard, what people have said, to help us, because at some point they're going to say to us, well, what do you want us to do? You know, yeah, we have information, but what do we think? You know, I don't know if we have the right to do that, but since we're the committee members, I would think we should take a little bit of time and just speak freely on. We've done it a little bit. We looked at those concept plans once. Now it's been out in the public. We've heard people fill our ears and say good things, bad things, whatever they've had to say. And I think it might be good to summarize it with ourselves, just so that when they start to engage us, we've got a vision of what we want, and it's their job to fine-tune our vision. But if you don't give them, they can't create without some basis. So that's all.
Yeah, I think not only do we have the right to do that, we actually have the duty to do that. That's our whole job, right? And it's not talking about what we want, but it's talking about what our interpretation of everything that we've heard from the information that we've gotten from Weston and Sampson, all the conversations and stuff that we've heard from the public. What does that mean to you? Because it could mean something different to you than it does to me. And I think it's incumbent upon us to talk about that and figure it out before we're telling them 9 different things. So we've heard from a few people that you know, there's favorability in moving this forward. I just kind of wanted to take the temperature in the room and mention that, you know, this seems like the logical next step to me, and I'm on board with moving this forward. But I'm curious, you know, if there's anybody here who's not at this point.
I have a question for Steve in relation to the concept around an RFQ. And I guess a six-fingered number has been thrown out. Has the council discussed funding that, or whether or not that money is available in the budget anywhere, and if it is, where it would come from?
So other than myself and Jeff discussing in previous town council meetings that this was the next step, there really hasn't been any arbitrary numbers thrown out there. So there really hasn't been any response as far as where it would come from. Go ahead.
So in conversations with the finance director and the town administrator, they are of the impression that the $400,000 to decommission Hallowell, this is part of the decommissioning process. So that $400,000 that has been set aside, the funding is there. So I've asked the question, can we use that $400,000 as part of, this is clearly a part of the decommissioning process, so can we use that? And I have been told that we can.
So that $400,000 is in this year's budget,
I couldn't tell you which.
or you're not
where-
sure?
I'm not sure.
Do you know
where
what's
that went.
left of
I
that?
would say everything less of what we've paid Weston and Sampson.
Okay.
Jeff, for a project like this, what would be a likely timeline? Are we talking like 2 months? Are we looking at 6 months? I'm just thinking about that cost kind of, you know, over time.
So typically, the way I figure things is there's 3 to 4 months for the schematic design, conceptual design process. So that would be the time frame for this. After that happens, this would be the process that we would go through, is that the architect and engineering firms that we've hired, it would be the conceptual and schematic design process, which is the 3 to 4 months. We would then negotiate with them for the design development, which is another drilling down of what has been determined at the conceptual design phase. It just is a continual drilling down. So we're now design development. We get another cost estimate to confirm the numbers that we did in our schematic design. And then the next step is construction documents, which is basically the instructions to build the building. And then at the 75% part of that, we get another cost estimate. So schematic design, as I said, is like 3 to 4 months. Design development can be 4 to 5 months, maybe 6 months, depending on the complexity. And then for construction documents, it's basically 6 to 8 months. And then the bidding period I would say, is probably about a month and a half. And then construction is entirely dependent on what kind of design we decide to go forward with.
It's somewhere in there between putting it out to voters and getting it approved at the polls, right?
That's going to be a part of it too. So I think what I would recommend that this committee do is that we do move forward with the conceptual and schematic design portion, build in enough contingency. During the cost estimate, there's something called owner's contingency, which is a percentage of the cost of work to really kind of have to cover us in case there are any unforeseen conditions or unexpected expenses or delays or anything like that. So that we could say, you know, one project I'm working on right now has a 20% owner's contingency, which is very high. And I would say, you know, it could range from 6 to 10% for the owner's contingency. And then that would be enough money to protect us and say, okay, well, we're gonna go with this option, this design, this is what we're gonna go forward with, this is what we're gonna go out and get funding for, whether it be bond, whether it be grants, whether it be any combination of the however we can get money, bake sales or yard sales or whatever. So that's kind of a,
Just want to note, my kid makes a mean chocolate chip cookie that I'm sure we could raise a few bucks with, so get that on record.
just bring it in.
Yeah, we need
Let's
to
try it
test-
out. We gotta
we
try
need
it
to
out,
test
but we gotta try these things before you do public consumption, right?
I guess one thing maybe we can consider later as part of this, it's relevant to this is, and the council might weigh in, when we're ready and we've engaged with this new group of professionals, do we want to go for one home run or do we give two options for the people? Is it we're with this one, you're either a yay or a nay? Or do we want to give, I'm just putting it out
Yeah.
there. Do we want to consider giving the people a choice? Or are we going to think for them and say, I don't mean it in a derogatory sense, but at some point you have to make
Yeah.
decisions. Do we say, these are our two best, you can choose? Or do we say, you know what, this is the best and it's either a yay or a nay? Council may not have given that some thought, but maybe
Yeah.
it should be kicked
And-
around.
And that's why in the RFQ, I've requested that there's 2 to 3 options, and they're holding 3 public meetings.
Okay.
So then that way, we have the ability to get the input. If they are looking, if they review the Weston Sampson report, and they're like, okay, we see where you guys are going, here's 2 options for this layout, they can do something like that.
But if we,
And then we can further refine that down
but
the
if we
line.
go public with the bond, it would only be.
Only be
whoever's
one.
Oh, yeah,
involved.
yeah.
That's what I
Yeah,
remember.
I think you
It's a
put your
dollar
best
figure.
foot forward.
We wouldn't have two.
No.
We would weed it out and go
Exactly.
with the one.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing we have to think too, and I know that we had kind of alluded to it when we initially started this committee, is that, we have to be very methodical about it, right? Because right now, as a town, we're trying to have the town residents understand not only the need for a police station, but the fact that it's in everyone's best interest to, potentially have a brand-new police station where everybody benefits, not just the police department. I mean, that's gonna come with a pretty hefty price tag, so we don't want to have the police station go off for bond where it hits the ballots, and then shortly behind it, whether it's the same year, which I think would be a colossal failure, or even the following year, us coming in again and saying, okay, here's another request that we're going for a bond, during that subsequent election year. So we gotta be very, very methodical, whether we break it up into 2 or 3 different stages or phases, something where, we're not just, and I'm not saying we can't do this, but we just have to be very cautious because we want to get the project to move forward. We don't want it to get stifled
Yeah.
right off the gate.
I think it's also having town residents understand that these projects, we're not doing them just to spend everybody's money. We're doing them to invest in the town. I've walked through the police station quite a few times, and it's a big liability. There are things falling down. It's the accreditation of the police force is at risk because we have evidence rooms that aren't climate controlled. There's a lot of issues. And there's also a lot of issues that we don't have a senior center, we don't have a community center. So it's not that we want to raise taxes unilaterally and are greedy for money. It's that we want to properly invest in our town, similar to the other towns that are around us. We want to make sure that we're providing for our seniors, providing for the youth, providing for us, because I'm going to be down there. So it's not just. I'd hope that folks can be able to see the bigger picture in town, that it's not that we're looking to spend their money on frivolous things. It's we're trying to make an investment because look at what happened with Hallowell. We wouldn't be in this position if the town invested the money for the upkeep of Hallowell. The upkeep didn't happen. Similar with the police station, the upkeep didn't happen. We had a report in 2007 that said you should fix the brick walls, and the brick walls have not been fixed at the Bushy School. So That's one of the things that I want to impress the most about this project and the police station and whatever other building projects that we go forward with in town. Is that we're investing.
I would offer that, to go beyond that, I don't know how, I personally look at the Hallowell project, and from what I've read about the police station, as not two wants, but two needs. So, I don't know how, inevitably, we move forward without looking at both the police station and what we're gonna propose for Hallowell together,
Yep.
right? I think we need to, as a town, look at the value, what both projects bring, and determine that we need both of them. And they can't be independent. I mean, you know, from history, you get bonds pitting separate things against each other. Somebody loses. And I'm hopeful nothing loses here. And
Yeah.
I think collaboration between whatever the MBRTF or whoever it is driving the police station initiative, and us realize that together we succeed, otherwise
Yeah.
everybody loses.
Speaking to that and staying on topic, in order to present the best foot forward to gain funding, then we will hopefully all take the next step in the RFQ and the RFP. Is there anything that we need to do as a committee to move these forward?
I think what I would look for is a motion to move forward with these, share them with the town solicitor so that he can have his input, make his adjustments. I'll bring it back at the next meeting. We can review it, finalize it, and say, you know, we're recommending these two, this RFQ and this RFP upon completion of the Weston Sampson report and presentation.
I'll move to approve.
Okay?
I'll second that. Steve, when are they planning to go to bond? You guys are way ahead of where we are.
So,
22?
Could they?
So, one of the other things that I want to talk about for the request for the proposal is that, and Steve, I would lean on your thoughts on this a little bit. Would the town council prefer, the request for proposal is for work that is listed under $25,000. There's a state master price agreement with various firms to do hazardous materials testing. There's quite a few that I know by name because they've either appeared before us on planning board or just in working in the architectural field. What I want to ask is, do you think town council would prefer that I reach out to some of these companies, get a price, and then present that to the town council so that we can get this hazmat testing and remediation situation taken care of? Or would they like to see the RFP first and then put it forward? I'm trying to do more legwork so that they don't have to.
So I would answer it this way. I'm all about streamlining things. Others may not be.
Okay. We'll go with that.
Okay.
We'll go with the. So then, in that instance, I will request a motion to recommend to town council that we put out the request for proposal with the list of contractors from the Rhode Island Master Price Agreement. Do I have a motion for that?
I have a question.
Okay.
So when you look at it, there's a request for on-call service billed at hourly rates. Is this lump sum, or is this hourly?
This would be a lump sum.
Okay.
And then. A max of 25,000. So to give everybody an idea, I received a proposal for a project at work for hazardous materials and testing, 150 samples for $3,500.
Okay.
If we were to test every building for all of the items that we have, it would be like 165 test samples. So it could, I know we had the discussion if we wanted to just choose some buildings or do all of the buildings. So I think that would be kind of the first thing I would want to get a consensus on.
I just want, so when it comes to testing, are we only gonna have them test what the bare minimums are for what they're looking for? I mean, we're not gonna ask them to test for certain things, because that could kind of open
No,
up.
we're not doing exploratory.
Okay,
We're doing suspected materials that have been identified by Weston and Sampson and the other hazardous materials reports.
I think to your question, it was Weston and Sampson that had suggested we do random buildings, and I think it was myself that indicated that it's kind of foolishness, since we have to deal with it anyway. Let's test every building, so we get a good report and we know what our exposure is gonna be financially. And then they're all trained, they know from the age of the building, they know what they should be looking for, what was asbestos during that time of construction, what materials are likely to have asbestos. They know exactly what they should be testing, because ultimately it's their liability to say that, everything we believe we've tested is clear, you can dispose of the building, or you need to abate it, one or the other. But I definitely think we should test every building.
Okay. One thing that I did note that I don't have on this is to provide a cost estimate for remediation, so then that way we can put a dollar amount to it.
Oh, I thought you were gonna.
I thought I did too,
Yeah.
but I didn't, so I'll add that to that list.
We had a motion and a second, I thought. We had a motion, Yeah, Bob had the second.
So I just have one question. With that proposal, are we just looking to have someone come in and run the tests, or?
Yes.
Would that same company also be the remediation company? Or they're
No.
just giving a rough estimate of what it would cost to remediate it?
What they would do is they come in, they scrape the materials, test them, confirm whether or not they're asbestos-containing materials or lead or PCBs, whatever, what have you. And then, based on that information, they will write what's called a specification on how to remove said materials. So then that gets taken and provided to a contractor, who usually will hire a specialist to come in, take out all those materials properly, dispose of them properly, and so we would just be doing the first two parts. We wouldn't be having a contractor come in and take everything out.
So where does that, you just mentioned putting in a cost for remediation.
So a cost estimate for remediation.
So they would estimate what it would cost?
So that, yeah, exactly.
Okay, yeah, I mean.
For that third part,
So is it pretty accurate?
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. Who seconded the motion?
I'll second.
No, you need to rescind your second.
I rescind my second.
Who made a motion?
I motion
You need to rescind your motion.
I rescind.
Okay.
As long as he gets to make the new.
And I'm about to go forward with it again.
Okay. So
Changed my
ne-
mind before and I'm going back on it again.
Tell us what the motion should be, and I'll make that motion.
A motion to go forward with the RFP.
Chris will second.
okay.
Oh, boy, we got seconds flying.
So we have a motion to move forward as amended by Lori and a second from Chris. All in favor?
Aye.
Perfect. All right. Let's move along to our next topic of discussion. For discussion, consideration, and action, progress of outreach by committee members. Chris did pen a letter to the student council, which we shared with Mr. Pepin, the head of the guidance department over at the high school, and we have not heard anything. So I will just ask, has anybody else talked with community members that they want to report back on? The YMCA folks will be here at our next meeting, so that will be the first thing on the agenda that we talk about and talk with them out of respect for their time. But is there anything that people want to mention?
So Frank and I were scheduled to go to South Kingstown tomorrow. The director had a commitment that came up. We've rescheduled to next Friday. So hopefully by the 21st, maybe we'll have a nice little presentation put together. The bar's been set high by the previous one, so we'll do our best to maintain that level of presentation.
Perfect. Has anybody else talked with anybody? Had a good conversation about Hallowell? I will say, I did receive some correspondence from Cheryl and Ann from Parks and Rec about how the success of the community garden, and they were thinking that in their next proposal that they will be looking for more space because they were so wildly successful. So I certainly, for one, am in full support of giving them some more space and giving them a more permanent home, but it will just be dependent on where they can get some water from, because a lot of the water is shut off to the buildings.
Well, what if we gave the gentleman that was here last time, he had that great idea about working and pulling up water up from the wetland area. If we go ahead and tell them, because it is fall, so they need to be getting ready for spring, and the spring gardening season next year, what if we just said you could have the softball field area down there? I mean, that's massive. That's awesome. And it's plowed for them already, and that they can go ahead and start preparing.
Yep.
It's all about the prep work.
Yeah.
I also think that if we're gonna give them an option, we should incorporate it into
Yep.
the architectural, so that if we're gonna give them something, we should give them a location that would be free and clear of any demolition or construction-related activities, so that they can continue for 3 or 4 years at that location without
Right.
being disturbed until they could be incorporated into their final location. If it's the one good thing we've got going down there, so we should certainly encourage it.
Yeah.
I don't think it would be hard, once we get going, for the firm to say, okay, we're gonna assign this location, and if any minor work needs to be done, then it could be dealt with.
And it's also separate now, so they can go ahead and get started, and as opposing to like all construction equipment can stay on the opposite side.
We just keep that at harm's way. I think there's a hydrant. Well, if there's a hydrant.
There's a hydrant, but the gentleman that was here at the last meeting, he had talked very technical talk. But he was talking about building a pump system from the spring that is right there in the wetland area. And, well, I mean, it's kind of,
He was gonna do it with the Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
His idea was
yeah,
to do it with the Boy Scouts.
and the school engineering firms, which I thought was great, so.
But as a short term, while that was evolving, the DPW with the fire department, just like when you're replacing a water main, they could put a tap off of one
Yep.
side, very easily get them the water they
Right.
need, and not jeopardize fire protection if it's needed.
Okay.
I'm also realizing this is our first meeting since Pumpkin Fest.
Right.
So it's probably worth just kind of putting on the record, just something about that experience.
I'm glad you said it because I have it written down and I
Oh.
just,
Well, I can say I was there for the morning shift, and for the 2 hours that I was there, it was nonstop. People coming by. Sometimes there was actually like a line of people waiting to talk to us. It was families. We had groups of teenagers coming through. I'll call them gaggles of teenagers coming through, and kids excited to talk about Hallowell, which is great. And I think the committee saw the response from the dots on the boards, which represented a fraction of the folks that we talked to. Just a really good community engagement. Seems like there was genuine interest and excitement about the site. Lots of different opinions about what they wanted to see there. I don't know how the rest of the day went once my time was over, but I know that when I was there, it was really positive.
Early afternoon was the same, Chris. We had quite a few people. And the biggest thing that I was impressed by, one of many, but the first was that I didn't get any pessimism. There was never a negative comment or we don't have the money, it's gonna be too expensive, why are you even doing this? There was no pessimism, everything was, first and foremost, we need to do something with it. I think they gravitated, we mislabeled that one building, and some people misunderstood, but then, you clarified it for them. But the youth and the elderly, and they loved the open air activities. So I didn't hear one negative. It was very, very refreshing to see that many positive attitudes.
I think it was important to note that the dots that you see on those conceptual designs were multi-generational, from people who have lived in town for many years to kids who were just out of Hollowell, 5 years ago, 7 years ago. So keeping in mind that feedback was important to us, getting people from across a different age spectrum.
Yeah. Yep, yeah. Again, I'll echo what Robert has said with the excitement about the project. It's hard to build excitement with the project, and to see this level of interest and understanding of everything that's going on, it was really quite refreshing. As opposed to some of my other public jobs that I'm working on, there's a lot of folks that are like, why are we doing this? And we don't want this. And it was just, I was happy to see that North Smithfield is not like other towns. So it was really great to see, and I don't know about the rest of you, but it made me feel good about what we're doing as a committee, that we're doing something right, moving this forward. So other than that, I have a little administrative stuff to talk about. Our next meeting is scheduled to be October 21st. I am going to say, or request from us, that for our November meeting, if everything goes smoothly as we've outlined in our timeline a couple minutes ago, based on everything that we want to kind of see happen with town council meetings and RFQ process, it's unfortunate that the planning board, their two meetings are on Veterans Day and Thanksgiving. So I wanted to offer up the 18th for the planning board, which would be our second meeting of November, just so then that way, I don't think at that time we'd have a lot to be talking about, because we'd be waiting for the request for qualification submissions to come in. I figured we could all have maybe a little bit of a nice break and take it easy for one Thursday night. And then we get back into the swing of things back in December, when we can kind of move forward full steam with a new architecture firm and go from there. Does that sound reasonable to everyone?
Since you kept us most of the summer, giving us most of November off is greatly appreciated.
I would just, kind of looking forward to, if this process moves along and we're working with an architectural firm for much of next year, do you foresee us still meeting twice a month, or are we kind of pulling that back, or what happens at that point?
I would say it's going to be dependent on the schedule that the possible respondents give us. Because we could be wanting to give feedback every 2 weeks based on some of their stuff. I have asked some clients of mine to not do it every week, because that's just ridiculous to try and have a turnaround of 1 week from one meeting to a next. So it could be that, I would say we just play it by ear. And if we at the very minimum, meet on the first Thursday of the month, and then if we, deem it necessary to meet on the third Thursday, then that's what we continue doing. But I would say that it will probably more than likely be the first and third Thursdays, just because there's going to be the architects and engineers, they're going to have questions, they're going to want to present design options that they want to get feedback on, they're going to be refining things, there's going to be a lot more active discussions amongst this committee, the architect engineering firms that come forward, and we're gonna start to have, you're gonna see that we're gonna start to have a bigger role to play in how this design starts to take shape. So,
Jeff, do we have to make a motion to forego the meeting on the 18th of November?
I don't think so, no. So, Bobby, we're all set for planning board now. Took care of that. Thank you, everybody. So, enjoy your third Thursday in November off and put your feet up. So, other than that, I would be looking for a motion to adjourn. We have a motion
Second.
from Mr. Mayo, we have a second from Mr. Corvo, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, and we are completed at 8:31. Thank you very much, everyone, I appreciate your time.